On the topic of feeling like you're getting gradually worse at the game, this seems to be somewhat of a universal experience, and I sort of want this video to be reassurance for one, and I also want to discuss a couple common reasons why this might be happening to you. So again, feeling like your skill has sort of reset or that you're gradually getting worse, this is a somewhat universal experience, and it's also not something that just kind of goes away as you improve at the game. And you'll find lots of top players that have been playing for many years, or even for a shorter amount of time. They can probably recount multiple times where this has happened. So I actually want to start off with this tweet from Whitecat. He posted this a couple days ago, and it says, "Bad days/sessions are hella demotivating. Your mindset just determines how quickly you can let go of the session and start again unimpaired the next day." Now, if you haven't really followed Whitecat over the years, I think one of his most important characteristics is the importance that he puts on mindset and how much he attributes mindset to improvement and all sorts of aspects regarding your gameplay. And on that topic, I think it would actually be really cool if Whitecat started kind of making sort of discussion-like videos like this one, where he just talks about different aspects of his mindset and also tries to discuss sort of bad mindsets that he notices in other people or that he used to have himself and why those basically are not ideal for whatever reason. So if I scroll down a little bit, you'll find this thread where this person mentions how sleep, at least for them, makes a very big difference on their reaction time and general focus. And Whitecat replied basically saying that pretty much every factor about, your body and your mindset, and that includes sleep, diet, general hygiene, exercise, and even mindset, obviously. And those all definitely impact how you play. And this is something that I touched on in OsuPhD as well, which I would suggest you guys check out that video if you have not seen it. But more specifically, this sort of goes into my first point on some of the reasons why you may be finding that your skill is kind of gradually going down, or that even as you keep practicing more and more, you're actually getting worse and worse at what you're doing. So this relates to the idea of making sure you get proper sleep and rest between sessions. But more importantly, especially if you've been practicing pretty intensely, it's really about making sure you give your body and your brain sort of time to recover, especially if you've been very physically intensive, training stamina and whatnot, but sort of settle in that practice that you've been doing and actually be able to come back fresh and come back stronger than you were before you were practicing. And basically what happens when you practice, and this relates mostly to the physical aspects of play, but it can relate to aim and in some cases reading as well, where you're basically working and exhausting your whatever it is, tapping, aim, reading. And in which case, when you rest and recover, your brain is going to be like, okay, we just did this activity that was very exhausting, very straining. And if I ever end up in that situation again, then I need to make sure that I'm prepared for it. So when it recovers, then it's going to come back a little stronger than it was before. And that is generally also how exercise works and things like that. But the concepts are very applicable to pretty much any skill that you're learning. And obviously, this is not the most technical way to think about it, but it's a fair analogy, and I think it gets the point across pretty well. So the trouble occurs when you try to challenge yourself again before you have fully and properly recovered. And as I've sort of discussed before, and again applies to many other things besides Osu, it is while you're sleeping and resting that your body has the chance to recover itself and, basically put in those reinforcements and allow you to play better and be stronger than you were before. And I think this is actually a fairly common occurrence. People find themselves playing for hours and hours every single day. And especially if you're trying to put in very intensive training, if you want to practice hard, if you want to work hard, then you also have to rest hard. And a lot of people just don't give themselves that proper rest that they need. I think if you really want to play every day, then you're going to have to be pretty careful and probably not practice to your absolute limit. But then if you're not practicing to your absolute limit, then you're basically leaving some improvement on the table when it comes to basically how much you got out of any given session. So for that reason, and I guess many other reasons, I would not really recommend playing every single day if your goal is to really improve more and more. So there's that aspect of gradually diminishing in performance that really relates to making sure you're getting the proper rest and sleep in between practice sessions. And I think the second most common cause for gradually diminishing performance sort of has to do with mindset. And while I think you could have multiple hours worth of conversation about how mindset influences your gameplay, what I'm really talking about here is sort of gradually thinking more and more more about the game and almost sort of overcomplicating things in your head to the point where, maybe when you were a relatively new player and you didn't necessarily know what you were doing, but you also had this sort of carefree innocence and you just kind of played the game, had fun with it, whatever. And then at some point you were like, okay, I really want to improve. And you start thinking a lot more about your technique and almost second guessing yourself. You're like, okay, if I want to improve very quickly, I want to make sure I'm doing things right from the very first day. And, any little thing that I'm doing, I want to really make sure that it's the absolute most optimized way to play the game. And while that is fair in some sense, and obviously I understand that perspective, and admittedly, I think throughout the community, a lot of people have sort of attributed me to kind of cultivating that mindset in a lot of players, which as an aside, I think is less about cultivating that mindset in players and more about sort of providing an outlet and answer to a lot of those players' questions, since I definitely understand that perspective. But anyway, I digress. So what ends up happening basically is you start overthinking everything that you're doing to the point where you're not really letting your gameplay become automatic, basically. I won't delve too into it in this video, but you should look into a term called automaticity if you are interested. But basically, your brain is a lot smarter than you might think it is. So I'm going to oversimplify things a little bit here, but basically, after you learn a skill and it's essentially incorporated into your muscle memory, then automaticity is really about sort of turning your brain off, so to speak, and letting it basically utilize the skill that you already have using its, magical brain-like powers. And the problem comes when you try to sort of disrupt that magic power that your brain is doing in utilizing the skill that you have, and you're like, oh, no, brain, trust me. I know what I'm doing. I don't trust you, and I'm going to try doing this myself. And unfortunately, that sort of mindset pops up most commonly when you're in a very high-stakes situation. So maybe you're getting your new top play, or you're in a tournament match or something like that. And obviously it's natural. You've all heard the saying, if you want something done right, then do it yourself. But when it comes to automaticity and skill expression, so to speak, then it can definitely be very dangerous to try relying on conscious action rather than just sort of letting your brain and your hands and whatnot do its own thing. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of raise awareness on this topic as a whole and give some brief thoughts on what commonly causes people to gradually get worse over time. I guess there's a third category, and that has to do with just not playing enough at all and basically not maintaining your skill in the first place. But I think that one is pretty self-explanatory, hopefully. But yeah, hopefully you found this somewhat insightful, and that's about it.